Second.
And go ahead.
Zoom meeting is on, everything's being recorded.
Okay, well, good evening, everybody. My name is Paola Tachi. I'm BAR Chairwoman, and I'd like to officially open the Board of Architectural Review meeting this evening, February 23rd, 2023 at 6:03 PM. We have one application on the agenda tonight, Mr. Perna. I'm going to be recusing myself from this application because I live next door to Mr. Perna. And with that, I turn it over to Mr. Honan to continue. Excuse me.
May the record reflect that our chair is leaving the dais and going to be sitting in the audience during the duration of this application. The first order of business, since we do not have a chairman at the moment, would be for the board members to, consistent with my letter I sent to you recently, is decide on a chairperson, an acting chair for this application. I had suggested that you come to a consensus and make a determination so we can move the meeting forward. And just for your context, the acting chair, the chairman of this board does not have any additional power than any other member of the board. Their function is basically to run the meeting so that they go in an orderly fashion and call for votes and things of that nature. But that's the extent of the authority. So that being said, is there any consensus or?
I'd be happy.
I think
my
you
services.
suggested Christopher.
I did, because Christopher, our last time we needed an acting chair a few months ago, Christopher acted as the acting chair and did a fine job.
Unless you girls would like, you ladies would like to do it.
Please. Thank you
Rob?
so much. though.
That sounds like a good idea.
Okay, the board seems to be in agreement,
Consensus has been reached.
unanimous, that Christopher Gow will act as the acting chairman for the Perna application this evening.
So, well, application number one, Mr. Perna, would you like to come up and tell us about the problem you've encountered and what your proposed solutions are? And I'd like to apologize for the delay in the meetings. We had a change in memberships and the bar. So, and with the holidays and with illnesses, we didn't have a quorum. So we apologize for that. But
Okay, just to keep everything as brief as possible, we all have other things to do. I just want to introduce my counsel, Jamie Ferrara.
Good evening, everyone.
And
Good evening.
general contractor, again, you've met him before, John Favela. And hopefully coming online, he may be right there, or I don't know for sure, but Jamie Machado, who is the civil engineer of record. Okay, so plans that were drawn up by him. Okay,
Yes,
so he's
JB Machado's here. I'm online. I'm not sure if he can hear me.
there.
You have to speak up a little bit, Jamie.
A little louder. Can't hear you.
Can you hear me right now?
Yeah,
That's a little better.
That's much better.
Oh, okay. Okay. Just making sure. Yeah, this is Jamie Machado. I'm here.
All right, well, as I said in the original application when we met, that we did not know until we started the excavation exactly what the geology would be. We did do some test digs, and the areas that we dug, we didn't encounter anything of significance until the actual excavation began. We got to a depth of about 5 or 6 feet in the area where the garage was supposed to be erected originally, and we hit very, very impermeable, very, very dense, hard, very significant level of granite, about 20 feet high. And so we can clear the top of that, but the 20 feet high and going back another 30 feet and another 36 feet in the other direction would have been several hundred square feet and several thousand cubic feet of rock that would have had to be removed. So in light of that, we determined that the best thing to do would be move the building approximately 20 feet. I believe it's 20 feet and 1 inch towards the property line, which is well within the allowable buildable envelope. And so we have a setback now of, instead of having it set back 121 feet from the property line, is now proposed to be 101 feet from the property line. And as the code indicates, you have to be at least 75 feet. So we're well within the regulations as far as the village code is concerned. In retrospect, I think that may sound a little strange, but God works in mysterious ways, because I'm very happy with the fact that I was able to save more trees. I didn't have to clear as much of that as I would have had to if I had followed the original plan. And the existing site that we have now fits the house perfectly. We don't have much of a yard, but we've got a lot of wilderness in the area behind us. And I didn't intend really to have a lot of developed gardens, or definitely no lawn whatsoever. And so it's not a tremendous loss that we were not able to clear that rock and make that site that much bigger. So right now, we're very happy with the location that has been determined based on the geology. We did further meet a few other boulders here and there, some counters in where the proposed site is going to be, but we're able to remove that. Some of them are about as big as this desk. That's something that can be managed. Having to take down basically a mountain was not viable. And so that's why we proposed this change. We discovered this way back in December, and at that time, we let Mr. Ledworth, the building inspector, know what the difficulty was. And we immediately submitted a plan, was submitted on December 27th, 2002. And here we are, February 23rd, 2023.
2022.
20 years later.
2022
Right,
is when we originally,
right.
last year in
right,
December.
Right,
2023 is where we are now,
sure.
and it's 2 months plus. And I understand there was a problem with getting a quorum, but here we are. And so basically that's the position. So I think in retrospect, I don't believe there are 2 members here that were original members. I don't think it would have made much of a material difference if we knew that going in, that we were going to propose to put the building where we're proposing to put it now. That's just my opinion. And that's basically it. That's the crux of the matter.
Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah.
Good question.
So, I mean, obviously you're well within the buildable envelope.
Mhm.
That's clear. And the setback is, well within and beyond
Right.
the minimum. And this has been passed through several boards, including this one.
Right.
But you come back with a changed board and a slightly different, some of the comments in the letters have gone beyond the scope of what is really meaningfully to be discussed at this meeting,
Right.
as if to critique the original application. And of course, that's not germane to our discussion. In fact, almost all of the things that were written and contributed to us were outside the purview of this meeting. Having said that, this is a tight community. It is important that people get along. And one of the many jobs of this board is to try to keep the peace,
Right.
always observing the law, always respecting personal property, and using common sense. One question that I have, given that this is, you can choose whether to say it is or isn't meaningful, it is or isn't an appreciable difference, but it is 20, 21 feet coming towards the neighbors. I go back to one set of comments that you remember that I had in the original application, which is how can you screen maximally using existing vegetation and trees, but also adding things that are native, at lower levels to complement the existing trees. I would come back to that and ask, is there more that you can do to make this as painless as possible for the immediate community and the larger community? Because there are people who don't even live on that road who are
Right.
who have a strong feeling about the application. A. B, one thing that occurs to me is that you would really reduce the impact of the house if you went up in value. Color consists of hue and value, right? Value is darkness.
Mhm.
If you doubled the value of what you originally proposed, if we could put, I don't know, Steve, if this is possible for us to do, if we are passing a change to the original application, could we put in a note that subject to approval of the building inspector and this board, that applicant would double the value? In other words, make it darker.
Make it darker.
Yeah, that would be one question that I had, as again, to be filed under common sense solutions that respect your rights as well as the preferences of those that you're about to become a neighbor of. That would be one question I had. I don't know if that is too painful, if that is not painful, but it's one I wanted to present as a natural solution.
And that could be a solution, but we have to also realize that you went through a very long process to get to this point
Right.
here, to get to the point where you were issued a lawful building permit for your property. And basically all the materials, the colors, everything was reviewed and ultimately approved
Right.
by this board, by the village board, and also by the planning board. You have those approvals with respect to the colors of your house and the materials.
Right.
However, you're always, as a compromise, and you're entitled to those, but you can also
Yeah.
yield on a certain items if you wish, but you're not compelled to. Just realize that.
I think in reference to where the house is now, because it's so close now to that slope that we cut, the garage, for example, is practically obscured. If you're up on the high mountain road, on the Lookout Mountain Road, and you look in, once that garage is put in there, you're barely going to even see that. Remember, we had decided we were going to put the wooden detail on the side to break up that wall, that continuous wall, break it up so it
Right.
wasn't just a complete flat surface. Uninteresting feature.
Mhm.
Well, the uninteresting feature now is going to be 3 feet from a solid rock wall, which, by the way, the wall is going to look beautiful with all its striation and everything else in it. But that side of the garage, no one is going to be able to see. And I'm only going to have about 3 feet just to walk around. So that's totally obscured now. So that part of the house you won't even see. You'd have to be actually right there on my driveway to be seen around that part.
Can I
Here's the wall and here's the garage.
Can I stop you with a question, Mr. Perna? So are you saying that by moving it 21 feet and
Right.
tilting its axis?
6 degrees.
Oh, okay. That doesn't seem like a lot. It looks like more than 6 degrees, but that's 6 degrees.
Yeah.
Okay. It looks more meaningful, but that it's actually more hidden, more protected, less
Exactly.
visible. And is that just the garage, or do you feel that that's the case for the whole building from various vantage points?
It's a good question. Probably from the lower road, where the other cul-de-sac is,
Hmm.
Lookout Stable Road, because it is moved up a little bit, maybe a little bit more visible. But again, that sight line, you're talking about hundreds of feet. And so if you are 20 feet closer
Right.
to that road, but from the vantage point of the viewer from the road, looking through there, there's a whole stand of 40 or 50-foot oak trees there.
Mhm, mhm.
I don't think it makes any real difference to anyone. From there, as far as being able to see the neighbors' homes, they're really like 400 feet away, because there's an adjacent lot between my lot and the nearest building. There's another 1.5 acre lot that's vacant at this point. And so looking that way, there's no material difference as to what the viewer is going to be able to see from the cul-de-sac.
I mean, all of that makes perfect sense to me as one person sitting at this table.
Mhm.
I would also say that normally when we get feedback from the community or neighbors,
Right.
that is, in the negative, it's usually about noise and blasting. And so in a way, again, on that count too, I would have seen this as a more neighbor-friendly proposal, this tweak. But if it isn't seen that way, I guess I just come back to the simple common sense of a community and the contours of a community and the give and take, it from where I sit, two ways of minimizing the inflammation,
Mhm.
a word that I spend a lot of time thinking about these days, is by redoubling your efforts to screen and committing to the same. And perhaps being open, this is just a suggestion. And again, I was one of the votes that voted in the affirmative to pass the original thing. So, but in this situation, I would say to make it darker would probably, from where I sit, be a helpful gesture.
Here's the dilemma. I stand here. There are two other co-owners of this home
Yeah.
that are all agreed that that's what they would like. That was what we submitted in the catalog, the colors that were there. And will that, as it's just a picture, will that be ultimately the exact hue that the building winds up, the exact value of that gray
Right.
that we put in there? It might be a little bit darker, it might be a little bit lighter. Once they're done with putting it on there, we will obviously get samples from the installer. We'll put it on a piece of wood, we'll put it up there, we'll see what it looks like in the prevailing light. But again, as you know, if you look at the wall behind you,
Yeah.
it's one
Right.
value. If I look at this, and that's the same paint,
Sure.
but it's due to the lighting.
The context.
So again, in context, there can be a shift in the value.
I mean, part of the
So,
reason I'm perseverating on this,
Yeah.
and I'll stop in a minute,
Mhm.
but part of the reason I'm perseverating is that the depictions on CAD or whatever program were being
Right.
used. I know when I try to imagine what this would look like to a neighbor who's concerned, or someone who's worried about precedent in the abstract or the specific building, I know based on conversations that they wouldn't be privy to when you came before the board before, that your intention was to have a gray that essentially looked like the granite in Tuxedo Park in Orange County. That was, am I
More
misstating?
of a marble with a darker line through it.
Okay, but
So it would look more.
Maybe that's an
marble
overstatement,
than
but
granite.
the depictions, the CAD depictions seem to represent something brighter, even from what you are saying, let alone what I was just suggesting. I know that
I haven't looked at them.
one of the neighbors thought that the entire driveway was paved.
Yeah,
And because the depiction, I don't think clearly made it clear that that's all gravel of the same granite. It is totally permeable. It is totally natural. It is of the land.
right.
But that wasn't represented in. So again, that's why I'm perseverating on this question of the value. But
Yeah, getting back to the granite in the driveway, since we did encounter quite a bit of rock that we were able to clear, we have a lot of rock now. And Mr. Favela assures me that he's going to crush that rock, and that's going to be the top surface of the driveway,
Fantastic.
which is going to be the exact color of the granite that's there. Obviously, when you grind it up for the first couple of years, it's going to be lighter color.
Sure.
But then ultimately with oxidation and with weathering, it's going to wind up more natural to the outcrops that we have all over the property, that you have all over the village. So it'll look pretty much like that. At first, it may be a little bit lighter in color, but then it'll start toning down. But when I read that letter, I thought they had interpreted the driveway, the temporary material that we have now, that's for the trucks to run up and down, may have looked like concrete to someone if they came to the cul-de-sac and they just looked and they said, oh, look, they put concrete here. It's not concrete, it's gravel.
It'll be
totally fairly large gravel now at this stage, because the finished gravel, you start, as you know, you're starting off with larger, then you put finer and finer and finer till you get to the top level, and that's your finest grade of gravel, and that all gets compacted, but it's still reasonably permeable. In other words, water will be able to seep through that road, rather than if you have concrete or asphalt, all that water is going to be coming down the road.
And I would just say, before I yield the floor to you, Christopher, and the other members, because I think it's important to remember, and again, this has become a political reality, this sort of reapplication to move and pivot the house. So I think it's important to restate, for the benefit of those who weren't here for the original application, how commendable this application is on various levels. I will say, I cannot think of another driveway of any grade at that length, which is entirely gravel, which is entirely permeable. And someone can correct me if I'm forgetting another one, but that is a net benefit to the property owner, but to the community and to the environment. That single fact, that is commendable. Having a carbon neutral home is commendable, and is in fact the necessity moving forward in the next several decades, or however long we may live. So I just want to restate that for the benefit of people who may not have been here for the original application. This is a different kind of house, and it hews to various different sort of models, but it's doing a lot of good, I feel. I'm done.
Getting back to, so the point that Rob made about landscaping, about the trees, obviously.
Right.
You know, the granite, a natural thing, that's fantastic. So the trees is a natural thing, and that's I think in my book more important than the color values of the house. It's something that can be
Right.
easily agreed on. So, and I think some of the neighbors have commented on that, about the screening of it, so that people don't have to see your house. So ramping up the trees, evergreen trees
Right.
would be great, so that people, both neighbors, all the neighbors don't have to see it. It's not in. So that's the following up from Rob. The other question I have: what other implications of moving of the house may happen with the location of the septic clean out, any of the other
None of
structures?
that changed, and this site plan is based on an original site plan that had been approved during the time when the original subdivision occurred. I believe it was originally approved in 1984. And on that plan, the septic field was designated. The septic field as proposed here hasn't moved.
So there's no other implications, no other
So
changes.
we're talking about 40 years or so ago, the original location of the septic was there, and we haven't changed it. And the cleanouts, as far as the plan that I proposed, we haven't changed the cleanout. Obviously, the cleanouts move with the house to be congruous with the
Right.
with the plan, but in toto, there is not really no change as far as that goes. It'll still be basically in relationship to where the building is. The cleanouts are going to be basically in the same place.
Mr. Burnett, have you designated where the new septic cleanout is? I see that the tank is still where it was, but where would it would be right here? Or?
Yeah.
But that's where the house is now. So where, right? Did you just move it slightly? Is that south or slightly below the house, or to the swale?
Might be,
Oh,
One there.
oh, there's one there. I see there's several.
right.
Okay.
Right, because again, we want to make sure we have access, easy access to it without having to bring it. Although they tell me now that they have septic trucks that have 100-foot long hose, so you don't have to get that close to where the clean out is, but still we put the clean out in a reasonably easy place to reach. So a normal truck with maybe a 40-foot hose could reach it.
Mhm.
But I am very interested, as you are, to do the planting of evergreen trees. We don't have any evergreen trees at all. And I think during one of the meetings, we did have an opportunity to discuss species. One of the things I was considering was American holly trees. They take a longer time to grow, but you can plant them pretty close. They're very dense.
They're good for dry shade too, which
Yeah.
is, I think, the condition here.
Yeah, so, and they do very well in the shade, right?
A
So-
dry shade, which is a different thing. from
Right,
other
there's
shades.
very dry shade there. So it's something we need to be considering as we move closer to getting to the point where we're going to be putting those trees in. And we will present that plan at that time. But I am anxious to fill those areas below the oak canopy with as many evergreen trees, because it does look a little bit stark in the wintertime. When all the leaves are on and we have the saplings with leaves on them, there is more natural shading right now. But right now, it does look a little bit open. It will look a lot more full, a lot less open once we fill those spaces with evergreens. And I want to consider, I'm not a baby, so I don't have 100 years to wait for trees to grow. So I'm going to try to research some species that are going to be fairly fast growing, but are also going to be evergreen trees. And we're talking about maybe long needle pines that may grow faster than the smaller needle pines.
Like a white pine, you mean?
Yeah, so exactly. So we know, but I've got to make sure that the deer don't eat them. So we got to make sure we get a species that's going to be, that'll accept the soil values that are there too. And, there's still some research before we decide on the actual species that we're going to be putting in.
I think
But-
red cedar as well, or I think it's red
Well,
cedar.
I'm open to all suggestions as far as that, and I certainly would defer to Christopher in reference to the selection of those.
Well, I would, my recommendation would be to start planting, in the planting season coming up, but to
Right.
try and start to experiment to see which ones, because I think that would be the key thing to suggest to the neighbors to block that off. I don't have any more questions. Do any of my colleagues have any questions or concerns?
I was just wondering, do we read these? I thought it was part of the process.
Oh,
to read
we
the
will.
neighbors.
Well,
Oh, at the
We
end.
will get to
oh.
that, yeah. I mean, but do we have any questions and, or
Yes, we all did our due diligence with catching up to the new process and trying
Did
out.
you get an opportunity to go and see the
Yes,
site?
yes,
Okay.
thank you. We
Great, thank
did
you.
go. I'm very confident that the bar thought about the original location very carefully with the neighbors in mind. And I must say, I did become concerned about the move of 20 feet. The distance is as far as the wall to here, and it's, to all the way here. In fact, at the end of those 20 feet is quite a steep slope. So between the house and the slope, there's very little ability to plant trees. The slope is very rocky and steep. So the few trees that are there, I don't think have a very long lifetime anyway. So I think to have that much distance for planting would really help the neighbors. I feel that once a wall of 24 feet comes towards you by that much, it becomes quite overwhelming and looming, especially since it is on a precipice, which almost acts like a pedestal for the building. So I would be so grateful if you could perhaps create a type of mock-up or a visual, just maybe some sort of mock-up if possible to show us what that would be like. because it's the neighbors. I think it is very important to consider those views because everyone's going to live together, and soon one of the neighbors might wish to build, and it might actually help you to be further back at that point. So those are my considerations, just the movement forward of a shear wall. Before the move, I felt if you looked from the road, you would only see probably a small aspect of the house, whereas if it comes forward, you would see the entirety of the facade. And again, the shrunken distance, I don't believe would allow many trees, to create a thick foliage there.
I think I differ with you in that. I think we do have enough room to put a reasonable number of trees there. Considering the ball of a tree could be up to 4 or 5 feet. I think we can safely put those trees there. I've seen evergreen trees growing naturally right out of rock. So I'm not that concerned about that. I'm more concerned about putting the right species in and having something that's going to thrive there. And I don't really think that it's going to be a problem, to tell you the truth. In reference to this whole controversy, we really take a great affront on this whole issue, because when a neighbor has a setback from their neighbor behind them of only 20 feet or so, or 30 feet or so, and they also open their front door and they're looking at the neighbor across the road who's 50 feet away from them, that doesn't seem to be a problem for anybody. But I'm building my house 400, 300 feet away from other neighbors' doors, and I'm getting this uproar from the community.
So
And we're the last house in your community. You go beyond my property, you can no longer consider that Tuxedo Park Village. We are the last building lot in the community. And yet we have this hue and cry from people that are online right now who don't even live near the house, who live a mile away, writing letters complaining about what the house is going to look like, and also pointing out that there are modern houses, mid-century modern and other modern type and more innovative homes that have already been built in the community. What we're trying to do is to enhance the community. And for anyone to make the statement that we are denigrating the community by building a building that's costing me, as much as this is costing me, $1.6 million. When you look at the appraisal of many of the homes here, my home is going to be valued beyond the median of most of the homes, besides the tremendous mansions that you have. So I think this is adding to the community.
No,
I
we certainly agree with
Right.
all of this. We agreed in the past. A lot, as Rob said, a lot of these letters and things.
Right, so I'm just addressing the people that are listening.
I mean, that's
that,
moot. Yeah, I mean,
We're trying to be good neighbors.
we approved your house because of all these good things, and we appreciate
Oh, yes.
all of that.
It really has upset my family tremendously
I'm sorry for
for
that.
the
I'm sure.
for the last 2 months of delay
Right.
that we had no control over whatsoever. And I would be remiss if I didn't represent their dismay at this meeting. So unfortunately, it is what it is, but I would appreciate it if we're able to move forward unencumbered. And I request that everybody vote unanimously to approve this plan.
You know, we're very sensitive to the delay and to your concerns and what we wanted, but you know, it is important that we go through this process so that whatever decision is made, that we're protected, you're protected, so that you can go forward without the full blessing of this. So I think the next step is that do you have any questions or comments?
Actually, I mean, obviously we've been getting up to speed, Stephanie and I, being new members at the bar. Somebody have something to say?
You've got the floor.
Okay. I want to get a sense for, you said that you did some test drills on the site, right, to get that original siting. And you didn't get any rock until you actually started the full build process. But how did you decide then, I guess, to move 20 feet in one direction versus 20 feet further back on the property for your privacy and the neighbor's privacy? I just want to get a sense of that thought process.
Were you able to visit? site?
Yes, I was.
Okay, you see the rock face?
I did.
Okay, that's impermeable. We brought a very, very heavy hammer on a larger excavator than we have on site right now. And the only thing at a certain point that it would do was the point would hit that impermeable area, and just a puff of dust would come up. And so that is when that was the end of that. Once we did that, I brought in a consultant, a man that has a lot of experience. He built the Saks Fifth Avenue extension in Manhattan, and it's all granite. We brought him up. He explained to us what it would take to remove all that rock, and how long it would take, how much noise it would make. And at that point, we decided this is not worth moving forward with moving all of that rock. Okay, and he would have been able to, it would have taken about 2 or 3 weeks. And you have experience with rock. Yes, go ahead, Jamie.
I just wanted to add another comment to answer the current lady's question, and the lady before that asked about the ability to grow trees in the area that she was describing. This is a twofold answer for both questions. And the original location, if it was built there, would cause the building to go higher because of the lack of ability to go downward with the foundation footing. And in retrospect, relocating the house took advantage of the most usable portion of the site, which would answer the previous lady's answer as far as ability to grow trees. That area, you could grow quite a bit of trees because it's the best part of the site, and it would also aid in blocking and the ability of adding additional trees in that area. So twofold, it benefited in both areas by moving the building. That's all I have to say at the moment.
Jamie, I have a question. This is Rob McQuilkin. So are you suggesting that, were you to not pivot the building by 6 degrees and move it 21 feet towards that particular setback line, that in the absence of blasting, and I suppose you can't really drill, so you'd be reduced to blasting, that you would have had to raise the house another, how many feet would that be? 12 feet, 5 feet, 20 feet? How many feet would that be to get above the problematic rock face?
About 20 feet at least to get up.
Yes, I agree with that, 20 feet.
I mean, I just ask the question because it seems very clear to me that the net effect from anyone, a pedestrian on the street, a neighbor, anyone, or people, by the way, from the above, the neighbors that are sort of in a different direction, or a pedestrian up on that street, Tuxedo Road, I think it's called, Tuxedo, that raising it 15 or 25 feet or whatever that would be a far greater ill, to the extent that there is one visually, a much greater impact than what is happening now. I mean, I come back to the house up on Camp Comfort Road. I was on the planning board when we spent a lot, and there was a lot of blowback and on that proposal too, I have to say. One of the things that we did for the benefit of the whole community, and so as not to pierce the tree line at the top, and it was subject to the ridgeline overlay, is to bring it forward. So we did the counterintuitive thing. We brought it forward towards drop off.
Right.
And you don't see it at all. The effect, sometimes I think it can be hard to understand or anticipate, but the effect of bringing something forward can be less of a problem visually or less of an impact than pushing it what would seem to be better in the abstract back. Because if back means higher, that is a much more problematic position.
I agree with you. And when we came upon this particular location, this new location, it just, everything seemed to click. That this was perfect for this building. And it was better than the original.
So I just come back to my original suggestion, which of course would involve some salesmanship on your part with the co-owners of the building. But I think that the beauty of that design, again, easy for me to say, wouldn't be my building, but to the extent that I'm familiar with it from the first application, I do not think that raising the value to make it a little bit darker, to get closer to the granite or even plus, would upset. I just came from the Salk Center in La Jolla, one of the icons of modern architecture, and it was a truly spiritual experience, and it was an amazing, but that value is what I'm sort of talking about. The value of that concrete, which.
Yeah, right.
I don't think that would harm your design.
But now
I
that you're
respectfully
talking
submit.
about it, I agree with you. I really like that concrete look.
Mhm.
So that might be an enhancement.
Oh, it's just
A little-
a tremendous building. I mean,
Right.
not in scale, it's actually very human scale, but the effect is
Right.
beautiful.
I agree with you there.
Well, we certainly value your comments.
Okay, oh, no, they've been extensive, sorry.
So you were interrupted.
Yeah,
Carry
I
on.
think ultimately, right, like this is a visual board. And for me, coming in at this stage of the process, there weren't stakes when we were on site, and I know that you weren't able to put the stakes in. And I think neighbors here prioritize privacy, they prioritize noise in these new builds, and also kind of the visual elements of what you can see from the street. So
Right.
I do agree with Stephanie that it would be helpful to have a visual from the street facing side, like, not some complicated thing to put together, but how this height impacts it on the hill that it is on, and how we can think about that from the neighbor's point of view. To Rob, your point, then how the color would be affected, because that point is the highest part of this project, right? So visually, it's hard to visualize without the staking and without the street side view.
On the site now, the excavation that's been done
Mhm.
is where the house is going to be. And so if you're looking to understand what it looked like, if you look at the actual excavation, you could conceivably envision, I would think, because I went up there too, but I put the stakes in. We were requested by the building inspector at the end of December on a Thursday, and Friday, the very next day, within 24 hours of the request, we finished the stakes. And then everything went dormant. Okay, for almost 2 months, we waited for this bar to reconvene. And at that point, it was determined that we weren't waiting for you, and we were going to move forward with the excavation as we deemed it at that time. And so what you see there is the process and the product of the work that's been done over the last several weeks. Because from my estimation, there was no possible way. I was reassured that that 2 quorums had never, ever occurred, that there were 2 meetings canceled in a row because there was no quorum. Then a 3rd meeting was canceled. 3 meetings were canceled in a row. That's 2 months delay right there. We had the most mild winter in all of our lifetime. I lost 2 months of construction, which is going to cost me thousands and thousands of dollars. So I had no choice. I could not wait. When you reconvened on February the 2nd, whose project was not on the agenda? After having been on the agenda, whose project was not included on the agenda? The Perna project. So I could not, at that point, understand what the delay was. And here's my counsel, right here, and there's my builder. And we moved forward because you left me no choice. There was no way of me ever knowing when you would get a bar that was functioning.
If I may just interject, and I say this as someone who's been with this for, I don't know if it's been nine months or 12 months or however many months, but it's the better part of a year. In no way, shape, or form could I ever imagine that a reasonable response for this board is to extend the process. I think that would be, quite frankly, unconscionable. I don't think it would be, I don't think it would be ethical. I don't think it would be fair. I think it was highly inappropriate. And I say this as someone who spent, gosh, going on 16 years on these boards, which I think means something. I've given a lot of my time and my energy, which is increasingly failing, to this kind of question. So I would strongly urge those who are joining the board now to think hard about that kind of decision, making that lightly. I think that would be tremendously damaging in the moment and damaging in terms of eventualities that could trigger. I do not think that is wise. I do not think that is ethical. I do think, and I come back to my points, how can we find a solution that is meaningful on all accounts? If we treat it as a binary, so if we don't vote to give our blessing and stamp to this, what would that result in? I suppose building 20 feet higher. I don't know. Or making an application to the Board of Trustees for blasting, which would be tremendously disruptive for the environment. But if we leave the applicant no choice, that is what we've done. Or do we creatively try to problem solve in a way with the applicant's goodwill and creativity and openness to try to address some of the concerns? As I said, many of them are completely not germane to the purview of this meeting, completely, and that's regrettable. But some of them are relevant. How do we come up with a solution that is meaningful, that is fair, that is legal, and keeps everyone on the right side of all of those concerns moving forward? I have suggested a couple, perhaps I would get pushback from the applicant or other board members, I don't know. From where I sit, that would be the sensible outcome to this meeting. I think that we owe it to the applicant who's been doing this for the better part of a year. It could be more than a year. I really have lost track.
It's getting there.
To stamp this and vote on it in a way that everyone can be happy with.
A question, you mentioned the distance from your house to the nearest house as opposed to the property line. That was what, 400 feet or something, did you say?
Probably somewhere around there.
So between the nearest house and your house, it's 400 feet. So instead of say 400 feet now, it's going to be 380 feet. So 20 feet in that context doesn't seem a lot at all to me. So it's not as if we're on Clubhouse Road where the houses are cheek by jowl and 20 feet is
right
in your neighbor's face. That's the context of the 20 feet. And
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
yeah.
During the initial review by this board of the issue of the distance of the neighbors to the proposed house, Mr. Perna did provide some renderings, aerials with the existing homes, with respect to where the Perna house was to be situated. And I just wanted to ask you if that gives some context to the new board members as to how much distance is between the existing houses next door vis-a-vis the proposed Perna house that's going to be moved now about 15, 20 feet from its original location. When I was looking at that today, I think that's good for perspective for the board members. So if that's accurate, Mr. Perna, I mean, I know that it's been many months since this whole board looked at it and
Looks
considered
accurate
this.
to me.
Okay,
Man.
sure.
This is the original proposal or the new?
Right, and so, and those blank rectangles are the existing homes. And so here's what we're proposing, and here's the distance, and as you can see, these houses are very, very much close proximity to each other relative to where our house is going to be proposed to be built. And so,
So just 20 feet in this direction.
and just 20 feet more this way, just at about here. So we're talking about the distance. This wing of the house is 20 feet wide. So if you just think about that little piece there, moving that much more in this direction, that's what we're talking about.
It's also important for the board members to keep in mind that this house complies with zoning in all respects. And although one of the issues for the bar, according to its guidelines, is to think about screening and things of that nature, there's no requirement under New York law with respect to if we're all in the same zone, if we're all in the same residential zone, there's no requirement that houses be screened visually from each other. The requirement for heavy screening would be with dissimilar uses. Say a commercial unit were to come by and develop near a residential, that new commercial would have to, as part of its site plan approval, have heavy screening so that there's a visual break between the residential and the commercial. In a residential development, there's usually no site plan approval because you're all in a similar use. So if you don't want to see your neighbor, you plant trees on your own property to shield your view, or you build a shed to break up the view. We have considerations with respect to screening and for planting, but there's no requirement that you not see your neighbor's house, basically.
And yet, but it is an option for the applicant voluntarily, or even at the suggestion of the board,
Yes.
to mitigate certain local concerns by doing that even on their own property.
Correct.
As we talked about.
But
But again, that doesn't preclude the other neighbors from doing it on theirs. I think it's very helpful to
And that's
remember.
correct. But so we have to keep it all in context. We do have an applicant before the bar that did receive all its approvals. And the visual impact of this structure on this lot was extensively reviewed. And we heard from all the neighbors with respect to that, and the neighbors' architects and things of that nature, and their attorneys. But the approval was ultimately given, and with that in mind, that the landscaping on this project, if I remember correctly, the idea was to keep it in its natural state, and not to overly plant it. And it was a design element that the bar agreed with and approved. So keeping that in context, I don't believe we're at liberty to change the landscaping plan. We are, however, if the applicant wishes to offer some additional screening trees, if that's possible, that can be done. But I think we need to keep in context what we're doing here, where we have an approved plan and we're looking to move the house approximately 30 feet. And does that essentially drastically change the approval that he had before? That's for the board to consider. And I think it puts it in context when you see the aerial of where this house is to be located with respect to the neighboring houses.
Certainly, to your point, it was fantastic with this applicant that he did that. You could see the visuals from the houses, which is something we would love for future projects because it makes it so much easier to get that visual of what it's going to look like.
The road is not yet. That's done before any road occurred, right? I don't see the dead end road here.
It's in
Oh, is this
area.
That's it
Okay.
here, right here. And so the drive now comes up this way to the site, but instead of going back further, it comes a little bit closer here. Okay,
It's just there are no trees there at all, so
No, there's-
it's
well-
very difficult to compare this to what there is now. I mean, it was just a complete building site.
right, but
So
right in this
they're all
area,
gone.
that's cleared and all these other trees are here. And as a matter of fact, we came before and we changed the location of the driveway in order to save the trees up in this area. We were able to save, I think it was 7 or 8 large legacy oak trees
Mhm.
that had been planted probably 70, 80 years ago. And we were able to save those trees by relocating the driveway 5 or 10 feet in this direction towards here, towards the house. And that there was a road already there, an ancient, probably wood road, that we're able to utilize rather than having it further away. And we were still able to construct the driveway, by the way, within the 10 degrees. Driveways by code in the village here cannot exceed 10 degrees of slope. 10% rather, 10% of slope, unless you get a variance. And we were able to do it without the variance, thanks to Mr. Developer
Great.
being able to construct that.
So the next step is we enter the letters, or do we open it for public comment? Which is next?
Well, we can, I would suggest moving to the public portion of the hearing. At the outset of it, we can acknowledge the letters that we received from the persons with the date. We don't need to read them. They're part of the record for this information. The letters are all for the bar members' edification and information on the matter. It's not for the public to hear. If they want to come, they can take a look at it. Also, in advance of opening the public hearing, I'd just like to remind those who are waiting to speak that this is not a question and answer session. It is a time for the members of the public to bring to the attention of the board anything that they think that might be relevant to our decision or this board's decision with respect to this application. After the close of the public hearing, Mr. Perna and his consultants will have an opportunity to speak further to the board or to answer additional questions of the board. With that being said, I don't know if the board members would like to limit the amount of time each speaker has before the board. Typically, 3 to 5 minutes, sometimes 3, sometimes 5, depending on how long the meeting is going to last. It could last all night.
Why don't we just do the upper end of that?
5 minutes seems.
5 minutes for each
As a-
person,
as
if that's agreeable to everyone. I'll keep a rough estimate, and as we're getting close to someone's end of time, I'll remind them to sum up.
wanna
With
proceed,
respect to
Mr. Bennett?
opening the public hearing, we'll just need a motion from someone, second it, and then vote to open.
I can make a motion to open the public session comments. Second. You have a second?
Aye.
All in favor?
You can ask anybody on the Zoom meeting to raise their hand, or we'll take first come, first served, wherever you want.
We'll do in the room first, and then we'll do the Zoom.
And before we do that, we'll just go through the letters that have been received and make them part of the record.
So we've received letters from Lily Newhouser, the Wrightsfelds, Paula Tocci, along with Cindy Booth, Sally Sunny, and the Knaves.
And all those letters that were received on this application will be deemed part of the public record of the bar meeting with respect to the current application.
And we open it to Mr. Rice.
Hello, everybody. Barry Rice is my name.
Excuse me,
Yes,
in what capacity are you speaking?
as a person in the public domain here, and I've already opined on this project. I was formerly the consulting architect. I have no formal capacity present here. I'm just a public.
Are you a resident of the
No,
community?
I'm not.
Would you then,
It's public, it's a public comment session, so.
anyone can speak?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So my time starts now.
Correct.
I have a stopwatch here. I will be very quick. Number one point I'd like to make is that Mr. Perna has an application which was approved some months ago to build this building on a site that was reviewed by this board and declined to proceed with that for reasons he's described. That's his prerogative. The delays that were caused were not because the board was not acting quickly. Were various factors, but the fact is that there's now been a third proposal on where this building should be from where it was originally. So I'll just say that 20 feet moving closer to the neighboring properties is not over a 400-foot distance. There is a vacant neighboring property adjacent to Ms. Tachi's property, which will have a house on it. So you must consider the impact on that property in order to determine the depreciated value of that property by allowing this house to be moved 20 feet closer. And if we look at the introduction to the design guidelines, one of the very first thing identified in considering these guidelines for the National Register of Historic Places is the preservation of Tuxedo's unique historic character and protect against unplanned disruptive change and maintain property values. Those are the two first items on the whole list. I think that the maintaining of property values has been completely dismissed here because letters have not been read and considered. Thirdly, I think that the idea that the building would have to be 20 feet higher to sit on the original site is not relevant because the building was shown 20 feet lower, assuming there would be excavation. So that is a hypothetical negative to the original siting. Fourthly, I'd say, in Ms. Tachi's letter, there are many ways to remove rock. I'm an architect. I remove rock all the time in the city with neighboring buildings. This is normal practice. The methods of doing it involve blasting, chiseling. There's many ways to do it. By hand, there's no vibration. Blasting, it's noisy and it may be disruptive, but just saying you cannot remove rock does not stand the test of common knowledge on how one builds in a granite environment, which is Manhattan. I've been an architect there for 35 years. So I'm going to stop right there because I appreciate the time that everyone's put in here, but these are very, very important issues I've just outlined here from the neighboring point of view and from the future protection of other residents in this community if other houses are to be built in a way that is not protecting neighbors' property values and the proximity and visibility to neighbors. These two fundamental reasons for having the BAR and the National Register of Historic Places. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Paula Tachi.
Okay, a couple of comments. One, I'd like to mention that the drawing, the animated drawing that Mr. Honan had presented to you and you had explained to them does not correlate with the site plan. And I had brought this to your attention before and your response to me that, no, it's not meant to be accurate. It's just an animated drawing. So I would like to make that point. Secondly, you made a comment that I open up my front door and I'm looking right at the neighbor across the street. That's not true. And vice versa, when the neighbors open up their door, they're not looking at me, and the house, at the bend of the road, they're not looking at me either when they open up their doors, and I don't look at them. So that's inaccurate. I would like to read my letter into the record because I do come up, I think, with 3 good options that I would encourage, this board and Mr. Perna to consider. So with that, okay, my letter was dated February 20th, 2023. To the members of the Board of Architectural Review, to Mr. Ledwith and to Mr. Honan, attorney for the Tuxedo Village Bar. My neighbor, Mr. Perna, who is constructing a new ultra-modern house on a 4-acre site at the end of Lookout Stable Road, wishes to change the siting of his house to a new location that will further diminish the value of both of my properties, my buildable lot and my home. This will be the second siting change that Mr. Perna has applied for. He had previously received bar approval for a driveway change that resulted in moving the driveway 5 feet closer to my property line. Now he wishes to move his feet 21.6 feet closer to my property line. And then I give the mathematical equation that arrives at that numerical value. This calculation is based on drawing A005.5 and overlay indicates the original proposed siting of the Perna residence being 123 feet 9 inches from my property line. The same drawing indicates the new location of the Perna residence to be 102 feet 3 3/8 inches. He also wishes to rotate this house 6 degrees. This is a major change that will not only negatively impact the visibility and privacy I have from my house and buildable lot property, but will severely and negatively affect the dollar value and desirability of both my house and my buildable lot. I've attached a letter from a local real estate expert who has been selling properties for 40 years in Tuxedo Park, which attests that this change, if approved, will without a doubt significantly devalue my properties and impact my quality of life. That letter here is: Dear Ms. Tachi, in response to your inquiry regarding the separate building lot which adjoins your home parcel in Tuxedo Park, I first want to thank you for forwarding the survey of your property as well as the proposed building plans and site information for the parcel next door. I felt it was necessary for me to look closely at the material and proposed changes before I could give you my opinion, even though I'm very familiar with the cul-de-sac. As I explained to you, my experience over the past decade selling real estate in Tuxedo Park has been that prospective purchasers looking for building lots have several priorities. The top one being privacy and setbacks from bordering parcels. Generally speaking, when buyers come to our area, they're not looking for a situation where they are forced to be wedged up against a neighboring project because of both visual and noise considerations. Your building lot is already quite narrow and very close to the proposed building project next door. If that project were to be moved another 10 to 20 feet closer to your lot, there is no doubt, in my opinion, that it would have a negative impact on the desirability of your parcel and the price you could reasonably expect to obtain from a prospective purchaser. You would be left with a very minimal buffer between parcels, and that would make it substantially more difficult to sell. Also, I would like to point out that in the design guidelines on page 5, it says that one of the key things in preserving Tuxedo Park's unique historic character, is maintaining property values. Okay, I understand the reason for the siting change is because the applicant has hit rock, which is what Mr. Wrightsfeld, another adjacent neighbor, warned about in opposing Mr. Perner's original application for approval. We have 3 types of rock in Tuxedo Park: hornblende granite and granite gneiss, amphibole, pyroxenic, subordinate caliscate rock, and quartz plagioclase gneiss. All of them are penetrable by drilling with the right size drill and proper drilling methodology.
30 seconds, Paul.
This has been confirmed by Professor Jim Hayes, PhD, Professor Emeritus of Earth Science at Columbia, and Patrick Donaghy, Account Executive, Structure Tone Construction Management, a worldwide construction management firm that does over 10 billion revenue. Patrick Donaghy has built homes in Tuxedo Park and has encountered these conditions and drilled through them successfully. Professor Hayes and Patrick Donaghy both are longtime residents of Tuxedo Park. I imagine that when the bar, when giving the original proving for the siting of this project, assumed that the applicant had done his due diligence to ascertain where it'd be most feasible to build. I just have another.
If you sum up, please.
And assumed boring tests would be done. These tests would have revealed the location of the rock that has now been encountered. A lot of time, tree removal, and site disturbance would have been avoided if these essential tests were
Point of
done.
order, that the letter is in the record.
It is in the record.
The public, the gentlelady has had her 5 minutes and she intends on reading the balance of her letter, which is another 2 pages.
I would beg your indulgence just to finish the options that I would like to have the board consider.
Again, the letter is in the record.
If the board wishes to give the speaker another minute to sum up. then-
Compromise, 1 more minute, yes.
Okay, all right. I would like to suggest the bar consider one of the following 3 options. Request Mr. Perner to move the original siting of the house 5 feet south and 15 to 20 feet west to the back of his property. This move will be still within the maximum allowable buildable envelope, not encounter as much site disturbance, and will minimally impact the visibility of the house and value of my properties and that of the neighbors. The terrain is not as steep and is more accommodating. It would be a reasonable and fair compromise. 2, to remain within the original site approval and get a bigger drill greater than 2,000 pounds, which is what his contractor told me he was using, and use the line drill and machine hammer method with Decopan penetration. Decopan is a material that is injected into the drill hole. This material then absorbs moisture, cracks and expands the granite, paving the way for the drill to break easily through the granite. 3, request that Mr. Perner revise his design to build around the ledge within the original approved footprint. All these are reasonable, viable options, especially on a 4-acre site, which the bar should seriously consider in order to avoid further objections and potential lawsuits from the owners of neighboring properties. If approval is given to this requested new siting move, a landscape plan which shows all proposed new planting on the property should be required before an approval is given. I would hope the planting would adequately screen the house or my properties. I hear the bell going off. I'll end at that point. Thank you very
Paula
much.
Tocci. Any other people here have comments before we open it to the Zoom attendees? If you are attending on Zoom, please raise your hand.
I think we-
Sorry,
Am I going to address at the end, or should I address now as a public?
You can do so during the public.
So I'll do it at the end of the public then.
Okay, very good.
yeah, that makes sense. Please raise your hand if you have any questions. We have no questions from the public. So if you would like to, sorry, your name again was?
Again, my name is Jamie Ferrara. I am the attorney for Mr. Byrne. So
The
thank you.
floor is yours, 5 minutes.
One thing I want to initially raise to the board is the purpose that we are here. I know that Mr. Honan, I think, gave the board its purpose, which is to make a determination based on the application before you under the guidelines of the bar. One point of fact that must be remembered is that Mr. Perna already has full approval for his color scheme, for the location of the trees, for the location of the property. He does not need any further approval for that, and he can remove trees, paint his house a brighter color, as long as it's within the approvals that he was given. That is one thing that should be remembered. Now, if this board denies this slight modification, Mr. Perna will be required to blast, which one of the considerations brought up is noise. And that will be a direct result of a denial of this application. So I know Mr. Rob, Mr. M.
Welcome, yeah.
Yes, I didn't get your name, but that was one of the potential solutions that he was raising, which I commend him on, was to have Mr. Perna compromise in some way, shape, or form. I know Mr. Perna, I know him well. He would be more than willing to do that to assuage some of the concerns. However, some of the concerns that were brought up in the letters, I think Mr. Honan would agree and was already raised, are not relevant for today's purposes. The issues for today's purposes, the issues to be determined are whether the guidelines are being followed by this modification. Now, Ms. Tocci has raised certain issues. She submits a letter by a realtor, which I have not seen that letter. I've heard what was read today. I do not know who the realtor is, but notably absent from that letter are any appraisals, any comparative market analyses, or any actual numbers about the reduction in price value of Ms. Tocci's property or anyone else's property. I would submit to you that that letter is nothing more than speculation. With regard to Mr. Rice and his concerns, as far as an architect, again, he brought up several guidelines that are relevant for you today, one of which is to maintain property values, which we do not have any evidence today that any property values will be modified. As far as I'm concerned, your property values may have actually increased by this application. But without specific evidence or documentation to support, I would submit to the ladies and gentlemen of the board that you should not speculate. Now, with regard to the promotion of character, again, I think it's clear that that is not an issue that is germane for your determination today, because nothing about the aesthetic of the house is changing. To conceptualize a 6-degree rotation, I know, again, Ms. Tocci brought it up, that it's a substantial, quote unquote, substantial change. If you imagine 360 degrees is a circle, 6 degrees is the rotation, which I would submit is anything but a substantial modification. With regard to 20 feet, again, the gentlelady addressed or pointed out that this room is 20 feet, but the bigger consideration is what is the total distance between Mr. Perna's house and his neighbors. And I think you can see with the aerial that the 20 feet is a small percentage of the actual distance between Mr. Perna's house and the his closest neighbor. Now, as to the application, Mr. Honan already brought up that my client has full planning board zoning approvals. He's not seeking to modify that at all. His construction is within the buildable envelope. The purpose of this application is to avoid the extensive cost, noise disruption, and further applications that would be required to destroying rock. The one thing I will finally address, I think you can see that Mr. Perna takes this personally, and he is financially and emotionally affected by this. I have concern when I was brought on that the closest neighbor, who is now the chairperson of this board, seems to be the loudest voice here. Now, my concern is that 2 subsequent board meetings were canceled, which caused delay to Mr. Perna.
30 seconds, sir.
I have no evidence to support my opinions as of now. However, I have reason to believe that there was something causing those board meetings to be canceled, especially when Ms. Tochi is the chairperson and the biggest objector to this modification. I asked this board to remove any influence that may have been imposed upon you and to remember what the decision is that you are making here today, which is under the guidelines, the visual guidelines, that the visuals of my client's house are not being modified. They are being slightly altered for logistical reasons, to save cost, to save demolition, and to save time. And with that, I thank you.
Sir.
Mr. Perna, did you want to say anything
No,
more?
I think that was done eloquently.
Do we have any more comments or questions? I had a couple of comments about,
The issue is, do you wish to close the public hearing at this
Oh,
time?
sorry,
Or do you
yeah.
want to, one more time, if anyone wishes to speak on this application before we close the public hearing?
raise your hand
Shout
or
out.
forever hold your peace. No, there's no, so make a motion to close the public comments. Do I have a second?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
So yeah, I have a couple of comments. The real estate value. So I don't think the real estate value will change at all. In that my house, we've talked about the Russian house, it's above my house. So so that went on for many years, hasn't changed the value of my house. Next to my house was a house 3 years modernized, right next to me, right on the edge of the buildable lot. So it hasn't changed anything. So the property values for my house have not changed at all. And the other point was,
On the issue of property value, just for the board's edification, there was no testimony here with respect that this board can rely upon from an expert that there will be a diminution in anyone's property values. What we've heard was anecdotal, and that is something that you cannot accept as fact. That is merely community comment, and the courts in the state of New York would find that there has been no proof. And I would advise this board not to rely upon any statements to that effect, because there's been no expert testimony from an appraiser with any specificity that there was. So just so everyone realizes, that's something that should be put aside.
and the second point is that when the Wrightsfeld house was built, which is one of the neighbors, they did a lot of work on the stonework, was it granite? And that which caused the neighbor, Paula Tocci, to have a basement flooding, because that's what you told me.
No,
Yeah,
that's the development on Lookout Mountain Road by Jake Lindsay.
it's not the Wrightsfelds.
No.
So it's above you. And then what did they do? They,
No, he went in and put in a new road, and there were no swales done. And we had a lot of flooding, as did the
and
Wrightsville.
there's no blasting.
Though I believe he did blast, I'm not sure.
Okay, that's what I heard, that there was blasting and it caused problems. So we appreciate that.
Drill here.
So we're very appreciative that no blasting is done and that alternative options are taken, which is the one you're doing. that is less potential for damage to neighbors' properties and for the noise. So we
Damage to my
appreciate,
property, I might add too.
so we appreciate that.
$50,000 of geothermal wells,
Oh.
900 feet of geothermal wells in that granite formation, because the formation doesn't know where the limit is. When you start blasting that, it would disturb the entire rock formation and conceivably collapse all 900 feet of wells.
Can I stop you for a second and then go back to you? So those geothermal wells
Mhm.
have already been dug or
Already done.
blasted, right? So they are intact and they are of value. Does one other question?
It was
So,
$50,000 to put them in.
okay, so two questions actually. Or you've just observed the first. So they are in danger of being adversely affected. Okay, if there is blasting. B, though, do they, as far as move where they are, are they built, are they drilled in a place where they need to be for this new placement of the house or the old placement of the house, or both, or does it not matter?
They're basically where the original location would be.
So the location would never have changed.
No.
It's just you're worried about whether they would
It's
be
within that same
compromised by blasting
formation.
Or drilling
or drilling.
Yeah.
You feel that even drilling could,
Drilling or cracking that rock in that area, using the chemical moves the rock all over.
Yeah.
Now,
okay.
who knows what can happen?
Well, the well shouldn't be put in first, obviously, they're put in the wrong sequence, that's the reason for the cost.
So the geothermal heating aspect of it is one of the brilliant points of this house, which we're thrilled with. And that,
And if I could just one last,
I'm sorry,
I know, I know I've
you've got
been,
value, carry on.
I know I've been blabbing, but just to your point, before we turn it back to you, Christopher, it is one of the most interesting and I keep using the word commendable because it's the word I keep coming back to. Commendable developments or in this design, because it's not that there are other geothermal wells throughout the park, but very few. And this is something that we can do, property owners can do with historic houses. It is where we can't, according to the code and certain architectural, considerations, can't do solar, right? Geothermal. So it's really exciting to me to see this being encouraged and people having a benefit of seeing it work in another house locally. I just wanted to say that.
I think that's why we unanimously approved your project, because of those compelling elements and making history in Tuxedo Park and adding to the historical timeline that we're in the present. So, but that was relevant to the last approval, but that was just for you newbies. So do you have that in the context? So I think the next step is
Can I make one just comment?
No, the public.
public
comment is
session is
closed.
closed, unfortunately. Sorry. So
If you have no further questions of the applicant, the board can move and see if we can come to some kind of consensus in moving the application forward to conclusion. And then once that's reached, put it in the form of a vote.
Before we do that, I have one question because I was curious about Mr. Rice's comment about the fact that what we approved is at this level. So in other words, the applicant would not be able to just take this original approved application and lift it in lieu of blasting, or is that correct? Because I had suggested that as a perhaps not advantageous to the community solution that the applicant might well be reduced to pursuing. But is that academic because it could never happen, or is that something that the applicant would be in their rights to do?
As far as citing the building, they can build it right where it's already previously been approved. With respect to the elevation of it,
Because we didn't specify elevation to my
we did.
knowledge. So is that an option that he would that the applicant would have or not?
I think he, under the under the approval, yes. I think it would basically built in that location.
Then that hypothetical is not meaningless and is something that should be very carefully considered as something that would be tremendously disadvantageous.
Can I ask, Mr. Perno, we discussed in the past, what is the elevation of the house now as it's proposed as compared to what was
It's not
approved?
changed at all.
Well, I show a main floor elevation of 759. Are we within inches of that, or do you know, has it changed at all?
The original elevation.
Well, I'm showing a main floor elevation on the plan that you submitted, showing the shifting of the house at 759 feet. Do you know what the prior approval was, and is it shifting? Is it?
It was 4 feet lower.
It's 4 feet lower.
It hasn't changed. It's a mistake on the new plan.
That's one, that's
So it hasn't, so what's the answer? Hasn't it changed, or is it 4 feet
755
lower?
is what it should read.
So the main floor elevation should be 755.
Correct, and it hasn't changed at all.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. It hasn't changed.
Civil
I'll
engineer.
draw to the attention. Yes, this is Jamie Machado. So I believe, I don't have the drawing in front of me, but I believe when I copied information to show a before and after of both buildings and do a presentation to show the difference as far as degrees and the distance. Some information were copied from older generations of drawings. So if there is a difference, there shouldn't be, it has to be the same elevation. Otherwise it wouldn't work.
I'm sorry, I'm just getting misinformation. The plan shows 759, you're telling me 755, and you're also telling me it hasn't changed. So I don't know.
No, as Jack mentioned, the original elevation that it was supposed to be is the same. Again, I don't have the drawings in front of me, so I'm not, in other words, the elevation did not change.
The base
If it
elevation
appeared
hasn't-
on there, it was, yes, if it does, if there's a different number, it's been copied by accident from an older version.
If I can just ask one other question,
Go
that
ahead.
I was here for many applications, and we did have an application years ago where they did encounter rock. And the gentleman actually returned to the board to discuss shortening the house to accommodate the rock. Is that a possibility?
It's a possibility.
This way, possibly instead of moving 20 feet plus or minus, you might only move 15 or maybe only 10. I don't know. I
Well,
know
I guess I
when
don't
we
need a
spoke,
garage.
it's a fairly, well,
You know, I could eliminate the 3-car garage, put the cars out all winter long, 3
unfortunately-
electric cars that have to be charged electrically. I should put them out, and that might be a possibility.
well,
I'm not being, I hope I'm not coming off in an arrogant way. That's not my goal. But we can sit here from now until the cows come home, and we could propose this, we could propose that, we could propose the other thing. I think we've made a very compelling case right now that the plan that we have put in place in front of you fits the building envelope, the allowable buildable envelope under the law. All considerations have been taken into effect, and the siding of the building as it stands right now, from my point of view, and it's my house, is very aesthetically pleasing to me and to the 2 other co-owners, my adult son and my wife. We all 3 agree that we are happy with the location. Would we have been happy with the original location? Most likely would have been, but the compromise location that we've had to put in front of you is totally acceptable to us from an aesthetic point of view and from a living point of view, that we're quite happy with the reduction in the amount of flat area One of the main things that we said months and months ago, I did not want to cut down any more trees than I would have to. And this location of the house actually conserved several over 100-year-old oak trees that would have had to come down. So we accomplished a tremendous benefit for the land, for ourselves, and for the community by relocating it where we've proposed it. I think it's a godsend. As I opened up, I'm concluding now. It's another thing from my point of view. I've exhausted everything that I have to say. I don't think that we're just going around and around, and we're talking about very minute
And I do
quarter of
want
an
to-
inch here and there
Right.
is pointless.
And I do want to reiterate that when you, at the board's request, kindly and creatively rerouted the driveway, you
Right.
did save another 9 or 10 trees as
I've
well.
had trees in there.
And the board at that time, and I think we could say the board at this time, remains as grateful as the board at that time was for that creative problem solving and openness.
Right.
So,
I mean, some of the existing trees, and you would appreciate this, they're old and they're fairly close to the house. And it's conceivable that maybe they will fall. We're going to try to keep them as healthy as possible, but I was not going to take those trees down
We appreciate that.
because they're there, they're a legacy.
Well, this,
I can't grow 100-year-old trees.
well, this is typical of your goodwill, and we appreciate that in this whole rocky, if I can say that,
Yeah.
process. We very much appreciate your goodwill and your malleability and willing to change. And given this is in the buildable envelope, and you've hit this problem, and you've come with this solution, given the overall grand area of the scheme, I am very happy with this proposed 21-foot move and 6-inch turn, and I would I'd be very happy if my colleagues would agree with me in order to move this forward, because it has been unfortunately very delayed and been a very expensive and timely delay. And it is not the purview of the bar to delay things like this. We're trying to streamline it to make it much more user friendly. We want to encourage new people to come to the park to build houses. We do not want them to go through this procedure. Otherwise, there'll be no new people purchasing property. So I'm very, very much hoping that we can move forward with this and vote positively that to accept this this proposal. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm very sorry that I'm new and we're catching up, and I'm trying to do this with all diligence. It's not any of our fault that it's a long and painful process. I think it's extremely important to come to a compromise, and we want to do our work really quickly. I mean, we've been swatting up on all the codes and the rules and the guidelines and going to every possible visit and studying maps. I would love it if you could go to the original location. I think it just would be, I'm really worried about the very big looming tall wall in the front. If there's any chance of providing a photo simulation to just see it, it feels right now that, and I've been doing measuring on my own building and stepping back and wondering what would happen if this wall came forward. I've been going through the park thinking how would this affect it if this house came forward 20 feet. It is a big impact, and I'm not trying to be vicious, and I absolutely swear I haven't been influenced by anyone. I'm just trying to do really the right thing, and if I still have this job, when a house is built across from you, I absolutely promise to take your views also into consideration in the same way. Would it be possible to do a photo simulation? Just so we see what this wall is like.
The excavation is. The excavation is in a form. You see a lot dug up dirt, you see mounds, but when it's finally graded, it's going to smooth off. There's not going to be any kind of an embankment.
Oh, you mean?
You're looking at an embankment, but you're seeing rough dirt, rough dig, piles of dirt, just stacked. So you're not going to be looking at any kind of embankment. The house is close to an edge right now, but when the dirt is finally moved and graded, it's going to be gradual. It's going to be smooth and gradual. It'll look like a golf course when I'm done. It's not going to look all hilly like it is. So I think your perception is not correct.
That's why it would really help. Is it possible to do a sketch of a simulation? See, when I had to approve something in Manhattan, the building manager was asked to provide a tarpaulin with the print of the proposed change, and the whole neighbor could see how high it was going to be and what was going to be seen from the road. Now, I wouldn't go as far as asking for that, but maybe a sketch of some sort so we can just see what it would be like from the road. Is that too much to ask?
The only trepidation I have is I can't afford any further delay, and I can't afford any further costs. I'm already deep in debt for the original application for the getting the permit is $6,000 and $6,200. I was assessed another $6,000 because for all the engineering that had to be done and redone and redone and redone and redone and redone and redone. I spent $1,500 on copy papers that had to be printed this big, $7.50 a sheet, and constantly bringing them in, bringing them in, bringing them in. And so we're at this point that I can't afford even another day's delay. I understand exactly what you're saying, probably because I'm so close to it and it's ours and we help design it and we work with the architects and the engineers that we have a very clear vision of it. But I think you'll be extremely happy with the way it's going to look afterward. I think it's going to look spectacular. And as Mr. Favela said, once he's all done, even the work that I just saw where the work that he's putting along the driveway itself looks incredible. So from where we started to where we are right now, I think moving forward, we're going to have a beautiful site and we're going to be adding hopefully incredible trees, evergreen trees to the deciduous trees that we have. I think it's going to be gorgeous from my point of view. That's what we want. We want exactly the same thing that you want. But I wouldn't be too concerned about that slope because that's all going to be phased in and smoothed out to an extent. So I don't really think that it's going to be major concern going forward from there. So, I mean,
in order to address some of the concerns of the bar members, perhaps we could consider a compromise to the extent of, my thought is vote with respect to the relocation of the home, whichever way you want to go with that. But then take it another step that at the appropriate time, 6 months from now, in the spring, that the applicant return for a limited purpose, and that's with respect to screening and planting with respect to a particular side of the home, to the extent that we've talked about at the beginning of this meeting. I believe there was talk about whether there's going to be enough space, whether there's going to be enough area for that to be done. If that could be done if that's something that would be agreeable to the bar, I think that would allow this applicant to continue the work that's been stopped now for almost 3 months, but also address any concerns of neighbors that this moving it of 20 feet would have any kind of an impact on them. I try to keep in focus and keep in mind that the house is being moved within the development envelope that was approved by the planning board. Planning board said anywhere you build within this envelope is acceptable and proper. Our board is to just tweak it and make sure that it's aesthetically pleasing in that location. I think the applicant has a right to build within the building envelope on the property that he purchased. I don't think we can prevent him from doing that. So, but I think we can work making it as aesthetically pleasing as possible within our guidelines and with the cooperation of the applicant. That might get us moving here and get a compromise that all board members can agree to, that there will be another opportunity to come back and soften some of the lines if it's need be. I mean, you may look at it and say it's going to be fine, or no, we're going to need some trees there, or some evergreens, or some white pine, or some red pine, whatever was mentioned. But that might at least get us moving forward on the application.
That makes a lot of sense, because that's what we're talking about, wherever it is, it's the screening to hide it from the neighbors. So whether it just shifts a little bit here, a little bit there, the same thing as the screening. So that's what the bottom line is.
Massively reducing the ability to screen. You're taking away, all the root space for the trees that could be there. It's no longer there. That's my problem. There's a slope, and you cannot really grow things tall on this slope.
Well,
I mean, slope where the driveway is, you're talking about?
It's when you're standing in the dead end.
Right, in the cul-de-sac,
You're looking up
right.
at the slope. There's
But that was the existing geology. I didn't change any of that
No,
stuff.
but that's pretty much all that is going to be left to plant on, because you're not going to be far back from this slope. I was standing in this pit. There's not much space between your wall. You can't really
You mean where
plant
the
right.
building is and where that slope is?
Yes,
But that's really by design, because we're trying not to disturb the property. Okay, yeah, it's 4.5 acres, but I'm trying to maintain the property as much as I can.
Am I allowed to address to submit?
Yes, you're part of the application, the applicant's
Okay.
counsel. You can speak at this time.
So, ma'am, my understanding of your concern is that if the property is moved 20 feet and rotated 6 degrees, that your belief is that trees cannot be planted in the remaining space.
that much fewer trees can be now planted.
That's your concern, right?
You can't really plant right on your foundation. It's
All right, so there's no reason to believe that trees can't be planted, right? There's no testimony, there's no evidence that trees can't be planted with the house at the new location. Can we agree to that?
there's not so much. There's 20 feet less space to plant them.
But trees can still be planted in that 20-foot less space, correct?
What is the space exactly from the beginning of the slope to the foundation?
I'm not sure, I don't have those numbers, but my question to you is we can agree that trees can still be planted in the remaining space, right?
Maybe if it's
Okay.
big enough. I don't know. You don't know what it is. I saw it. I stood there and it appeared very small. Maybe, do you know?
my next
do you know the
question-
answer?
My next question, with the
10
house
feet.
in the original location,
Mhm.
my client doesn't have to plant any trees. So that defeats your concern is the view of the house, and it might be imposing from somebody viewing up at the house, correct?
That's the concern, yeah.
If my client builds in the original location, he has no obligation to plant any trees whatsoever. So your concern can be ignored if my client builds the house in the original location. We can agree to that, right? So I think what my client is trying to offer as a compromise is that with the new location, with the excavator and the contractor smoothing out that area, it will extend the square footage of a place to install or plant trees. So as a compromise to the board, because again, my client has no obligation to plant any trees, is that as a compromise with the approval of the relocation, trees will be planted. And that would address your concern. Whereas if the approval or the application is denied, my client doesn't have to take your concern at all. Right? And then that's not being a good neighbor to anybody. So I think with what the other councilman or boardman has proposed, as far as screening, and that what Mr. Honan is now proposing, is that as the house progresses and is built, then we come back before the bar again
Right.
to address where trees are going to be planted, and if necessary, the property excavated in a manner that would allow additional trees to be planted, if necessary. But as far as your concern goes, I know that, and I say this respectfully, but it's somewhat irrelevant, because if his application is denied, then your concern goes ignored either way. So I think a better way to move forward might be to have, with the approval, that the approval be contingent on trees being planted in that area. That's what I would submit to my client. I would suggest that to the board, and I think that could be made part of the approval, which would make everybody.
It would be a compromise. I mean, it's, the applicant is not required to do any planting, but it would be a compromise to satisfy some of the concerns of the board members. We've talked about the building envelope. This house siting was extensively reviewed, and we're moving the house approximately 21 feet. That's the proposal. What is the approximate distance to the neighboring home? I know we talked about property boundary line, but what about the neighboring homes? Is it a couple of hundred feet?
At least.
We have to build a lot.
There's an empty lot there. There's an empty lot.
No, but the
Next
question
door,
that
on
the
either
council
side.
is asking
His
is
homes.
what's the distance
Mr. Burke,
between
Mr.
my
Burke.
home and an existing home?
Sure.
Not what might happen
Right.
in the next millennium or on another planet,
Mr. Burke.
correct?
Mr. Burke, it was 400 feet is the distance. Now it's 380. That's
Right.
that's the.
That's what we
380
were-
feet, more than a football field away.
1 1/3 football fields.
So
And realize also, value came up again. There's no proof here about value being adversely affected by any of the neighboring houses. So we need to keep that off of discussion and not make that a deciding factor here. Particularly an undeveloped lot. I mean, that is just, under New York state law, it's encouraged for people who own this property to develop it. So let's not talk about devaluing property because we have no proof of that.
in my experience with the applicants coming here, as far as landscaping is concerned, it's very much the carrot, not the stick. That if they have goodwill, we run with that they plant the trees, or they plant trees or not cut down trees. So it's very rare that we have somebody so enthusiastic about doing stuff that he doesn't even have to do, and certainly respecting the trees. So which is another commendable aspect about this project that we're thrilled about, because it's exceptionally rare, as you'll soon see in Tuxedo Park. Molly, what are your
I think that the point of this board too is to be collaborative, right? That would come from both sides. I did hear some resistance on color. I know that that's something that you need to discuss. But I would have to take the path of the compromise in seeing the plantings and the landscaping plans, what would happen if you were to make this move, like 6 months, whatever it is down the road, that we are able to do that.
That sounds reasonable to me. In 6 months, we'll have a very good idea as to what we're going to be able to plant, where we're going to be able to plant it. And we can help, get some ideas as to the species that we're going to be putting in there. But I will be talking to landscaper professional to come up with that plan, to make sure that we're doing that.
And if we're moving in that direction, could we just specify compass direction or what portion of the structure it was intended to be? Because it's not going to be a new landscaping plan. It's going to be plantings
Plantings is what I'm referring to.
near a certain portion of the property for screening purposes.
There will be definitely,
Is that correct, I think?
there'll definitely be trees planted in strategic places to provide additional privacy for myself, my home, and also will have a dual purpose of serving a certain degree of screening.
Do you,
Okay.
Steve, is it a matter of specifying that it would be, you
Right.
know, within
Moving-
10 feet of the setback line on the house side and maybe 50 feet of the setback line on the,
I was thinking
Oh.
it's for the purpose of screening the southern portion
Southern,
of
I
the
see.
structure.
Right.
Just so we're not looking at
is
doing a whole new landscaping
is
plan
this,
because
is this a
that's,
proper access? Is this south, northwest?
I believe, that's north.
Okay, good. Yeah,
North,
yeah.
so this is
Okay, right.
It's generally
It
the
is.
southeast.
Got it. So
So-
southeast.
So screening on the
Southeast
southeast.
quadrant or
Okay, just so we, 6 months from now, when we come back, at least we know what we're all agreeing to. That's the reason why I'm saying that, is just to specify so that when we come back, we say, we talked about the southeast portion of the building. Visually screening of that area.
Between now and then, the neighbors can certainly, once they see where the house is, they can certainly say, that's right from my bedroom. So make sure that little area there, that strip is the priority. So, you know, the feedback of the neighbors would be appropriate so that they don't have to see you and you don't have to see them. And
Referring to general contractor, is that something that we'll be able to achieve?
Sure.
Okay.
There's nothing removing the neighbors from doing their own plantings as well.
Absolutely, that is absolutely the case. Everybody owns their own piece of property. If a view offends them, they are free to plant trees till the cows come home.
What about getting a bigger hammer, greater than 2,000 pounds and penetrating the rock?
I'm sorry, there's no public comment right now.
so a robust landscaping plan later, a vote to approve this plan and with an additional review of landscape plantings in 6 months' time. Is that something?
Purpose of screening the southeast portion of the relocated home.
I just confirm Mr. Holman's comment that the southeast portion is the area that the board lady was concerned about. Is that the area?
The board lady is concerned with that area, yeah. That she also feels that there's no space to plant things because there's a drop, and once that house stands there, you will not be able to locate enough trees.
Is there?
And it's not about
What
the
is your name?
trees.
So I don't insult you by
Stephanie,
calling
don't
you a
worry
board
about it. I'm happy to be a board lady. It's a new
lady.
job.
B-O-A-R-D, not B-O-R-D.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the plan of the Perna House on Lookgate Stable Road, of the plan that was already approved by the bar and the planning board, but is a 6-degree swivel and a maximum of a 21-foot shift, as on the plan A005.5, dated 27th of December 2022. With the condition that in 6 months' time, we have the applicant comes to the bar again with a plan for the landscaping and specifically the purpose of screening for the neighbors and himself, especially the southeast portion of the property. Do I have a second?
Could I correct? It was solely for southeast, not especially southeast.
Okay, solely.
Right, because it's a.
Correct. It's not a new landscaping plan. It's for the limited purpose to address some of the concerns of the bar members with respect to screening
In that southeast. corner.
in the southeast corner of the building.
Thank you.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Stephanie,
Can I abstain?
certainly.
Yes, you may.
So we have 3 ayes and 1
Abstention.
abstention. So the motion is approved. Congratulations. Mr.
Thank you very
Turner.
much.
We look forward to seeing you in 6 months' time. And good luck. And as again, I apologize for the delay in all of this and this rocky
I was
road.
hoping in 6 months that when we come back and we're talking about the landscaping plan, old building is correct. And some magic there, and we're able to put trees. I don't mind having them very close to the building. So I'm more concerned about how beautiful it's going to be and how livable a house is going to be. And we also want to be good neighbors,
Thank you
to
for
make
that.
everybody happy.
And thank you for your patience.
Thank you so much.
I would like to make just one statement.
No, I'm sorry, that's not going to be, it's not appropriate. It's not appropriate.
It's just
I'd like,
clarify something.
No.
like to vote to approve the minutes.
I think we have.
We're going to,
minutes, yeah.
we're going to postpone that.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to have a conversation with Paula on Monday. We've been trying to,
Okay, great.
There is one
Thank you,
more
Desiree.
point of business.
One of the-
We do need to agree on the time of the next time and date of the next meeting.
Okay, so Paula can
I'd like
rejoin
her
us
to-
then?
I'd like her to rejoin us. So we can-
Hey, Paula,
Before we close the
we
meeting.
need to close the meeting. Get out of here.
Why don't you get that? 'Cause
You need to determine the
Paul,
date.
to
of the next
Paul, I
meeting.
don't know if we just want to at least mention to the board members, it was suggested that the next meeting would be held on March 16th. That
And we can't, yeah, because.
we
of
can't, we have
court.
court that evening. It was suggested the 15th, but that's the board of trustee meeting.
So how about the 14th, Tuesday? I'll check on that.
I will check on that.
This works
Um,
for me.
We do have as many as at least 4 applications
Yeah.
coming back and maybe 1 or 2 new ones. And I'll get that all to you after tonight's meeting.
Sure.
So we're going to go through this every time, right, with the court?
You know, but we'll see once we get a,
Well, what we could do is, it might be a good idea, just so we all get on the same page, because the meetings are going to be set and agreed to by all the board members as to what's a convenient time for everybody. So you probably should all collaborate as to what's going to be a good time. I believe under our code, we've been doing 2 meetings a month. We should also figure out whether that's going to continue. And our code also calls for 1 meeting a month and 1 workshop meeting. So I think we've been doing is just 2 meetings and dispensing with the workshop meetings. But I think what we should do is have all board members get on an email chain and talk about times and convenient dates and times.
well, I think if I may, to make it less, yeah, because our emails are always, they're so full and getting bombarded, just to go through John and, John
Okay.
can come up with the date and then
time.
just say, can everybody come on the 14th or whatever? And so be it, rather than wasting time.
Okay, I will check on the 14th and get back to everybody.
Date and times, just so
hopefully
we
tomorrow.
we can schedule them.
And also, I don't know if anybody wants to know, but we do have some stone samples that were dropped off today for for one of the projects. I'm sorry, the old Miller House.
Sung Schmidberger,
Schmidberger.
Tuxedo M&M.
They dropped off some stone samples.
Is it inside or outside?
No, it's inside. I
Oh.
have them in my room here. I can pull them out.
Oh, great.
There's,
Wasn't there any samples on site as well?
I heard there were, but I don't know if you want to.
Do you want to reach out to them and find out, and then we can all make a site visit to the site and look
Sure.
at the materials?
Was Mueller before this bar a few years ago? Who? Mueller?
Yes, what'd you say?
Mueller, the name Mueller. He said the old Mueller house.
Miller.
Miller.
I'm sorry.
Miller.
Okay.
So make a motion to close the meeting. Do I have a second?
Okay.
All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you for
8
sharing the
o'clock,
meeting.
8 o'clock sharp.
Good luck.